People are starting to come in, and you can, wait a few minutes.
Okay. Okay. You still there, Jamie?
I am still here.
Okay. You still have people coming in, or?
We do. You can make small talk or whatever you want.
Sounds good. Well, welcome to our attendees to our webinar this afternoon. Hope you guys are ready to help us defend the public postal service. Thank you for attending. We have a panel of established, esteemed panelists who will speak eloquently and passionately about the U.S. Postal Service and defending it as a public institution. Yeah, it's just great to be here. Hope everyone has a good time and learns about defending the post office. It's an important institution for the country.
We still got people streaming in.
Okay.
You might want to encourage people to put their name and affiliation location in the chat so people can see who's here.
All right. Yeah, so as you answer, please put your name, the organization you are with in the chat, city you're in, and let us all get to know each other and the struggle to defend the public postal service this afternoon. Good afternoon, Debbie Patton from Olympia, DSA Labor Working Group. Thank you for attending this afternoon. Sister Jess, the Rural Organizing Project. Thank you for being one of our panelists this afternoon. Look forward to hearing about the struggles in your organization. Brother Jamie Partridge, NELC 82, retired. Thank you for all you do for the Postal Service and communities around the Postal Service, one of the hardest fighters for the organization across the country. Ruby Garrett, DSA NTX, a concerned comrade in solidarity. Thank you, Ruby. You see in Brother Jonathan's background, we got the Black Lives Matter, which is critical to the Postal Service. The Postal Service has a large minority workforce, so defending the public Postal Service means a lot to the African-American community. So yes, Black lives do matter through the public Postal Service, and we will continue to fight for the communities and for Black lives that matter. Allison Ketz out of H-Town, Texas, DSA, here with us today to defend the public postal service. Thank you for coming through. We appreciate your time and dedication to our battle. I think I see Brother Tim Hall in the panelist group. Thank you, Brother Tim, for coming through. Always very passionate defender of the public postal service. Thank you for your time. All right. There's a nice Oregon beach behind just right there.
I don't think so.
Yes, this is what my my laundry room looks like right now. Really wanted to clean it up for y'all.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about 5
Yeah.
after.
Okay. You want to go ahead and get started?
Sure.
All right, let's do it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA4USPS webinar on defending the public postal service against plant closures and service cuts, which will have a negative impact on the timely delivery of the U.S. mail. My name is Aaron Brown. I am a postal worker. I'm a union steward with the nation's capital, Southern Maryland branch of the American Postal Workers Union. And I also sit on the executive board of my local. Thank you for joining us for this event this afternoon. The United States Postal Service is a popular public institution which has been in existence since the Constitution was signed. The institution has delivered parcels, periodicals, medicine, and newspapers, and other vital items at reasonable costs effectively throughout its history. In recent years, postal leadership has embarked on a mission fueled by ruling class economic ideology to cut costs for the organization by deteriorating services and decreasing workers' wages and benefits. Ideas like reducing post office hours, increasing the cost of postal products and services, and closing plants which process the mail are ways management have proposed to improve the agency's financial standing, but these ideas have not produced results management have claimed they would in the past. Today, we have a panel of esteemed, accomplished defenders of the Public Postal Service who will discuss their past actions to defend the organization and how we can all fight to defend against the future attacks, specifically the 10-year plan put forth by the Postmaster General William DeJoy and Board of Governor Chairman Ron Bloom. May I ask that if you have any questions as we go along this afternoon, place them in the chat and we will get to them as soon as possible. Our first speaker is a energetic, passionate defender of the Postal Service, Ms. Debbie Soretti, who is the Executive Vice President of the American Postal Workers Union. Ms. Soretti, could you tell us the key fights that we have in defending the public postal service, what tools we have to help the public engage in this battle, and who we can contact to help in this defense of the public institution of the Postal Service?
Great. It's so nice to be here, and I want to say thanks to the panelists as well. Jonathan Smith from New York Metro. He is the most greatest activist we've got in New York City, and the way things that he's done so far, a lot of firsts, right? And so we appreciate him very much. And I also want to say thanks to Jess, because the Rural Organizing Project, it does a lot of things out there for the rurals, and for them to stand up for us, the postal workers, we really appreciate it. And it's not just us, it's for the community. And there's a lot of things the Postal Service can do for rural areas, like broadband, like postal banking, all of those things. So just want to say thanks for being on this panel. Appreciate you guys. And what I wanted to start out with is that we have quite a few issues that are happening right now, and they're happening quickly. It's very, very important to get involved now. We don't have time to wait another month or two. We got to start like this week. There's been some people have already started last week, and of course the union has started back since 4/27, when we got a notification from the Postal Service about 18 facilities being consolidated and 2 others being considered. And that's not going to be the only ones, because I'm sure they're going to go after the rest of them that are on that list. And there's like about an opportunity for them to go after about 30 or 40 more facilities that were on the phase 2 list from back in 2015. So we really need, this is our fight, saving these first few, and then hopefully we can get them to stop or put a moratorium together. Mark Dimosine, our president, has been working with management back and forth over these issues with consolidations and trying to get them to hold off. The key thing here is that the plan, the 10-year plan came out. That's what it is, a 10-year plan. Why would you start the first 2 or 3 months of it and attacking postal facilities, communities, people who need the postal service? I mean, it doesn't make sense. So they really need to think about putting it off. You know, there's much bigger things that they're looking at with financial issues of the post office that are trying to get through with postal reform. So, you know, we need to really put a stop right now on 3 major things. Number 1 is slowing down the service standards. They have put a process in place in the PRC to get an advisory opinion, and they've also put it in the Code of Federal Register. So I sent Jamie a flyer that has some information about where you can make public comments in both of those arenas. So we really need as many as possible to make a complaint about slowing down the mail service. We don't want to go backwards anymore. This will be the 2nd time that they have tried to degrade the standards. We want to go forward. We want to go back to when we had great standards, which was back in 2012. So we really hope that you can get on the public comments and let them know that we want those service standards from 2012, when we used to have overnight delivery in our communities, where you could get a letter from one side of the city to the other and it would be overnight. It's ridiculous that we are going backwards instead of forward. The second issue is moving mail processing machines from mail processing facilities. And the 18 that they're looking at, they're trying to take all 18 of them away. I've seen some things that have come out from DeJoy in the media, and he's trying to say, oh, well, we might not do all of them, but he's not clear. What he said in the notification was they were going to be consolidated, period. He didn't say, oh yeah, we're going to make it, you know, this is going to be a package place and we're not going to access anybody. So that's the second big fight, is trying to save these postal facilities that are in I think it's almost 13 states where they're being affected. And then number 3, closing post offices during lunch hours, and then looking at closures of offices, stations, branches. We just can't allow them to continue to do that, because we're trying to expand and enhance the post office. So I did give Jamie a couple of the booklets that we have to help get organized in your community and try to get involved in saving post offices, stations, branches. Also a book on mobilizing to fight consolidation. So I hope that you take advantage of that. If you're looking for ideas and suggestions, there's quite a lot in that book, in those booklets. And can we do it? Yes, we can. And look what happened last year. It was so exciting to see that we had 12 attorney generals filing lawsuits to stop the Postal Service from taking machines out of the building. Even though he did get away with some of them, he did have to stop. And again, what was the major issue? Protecting our voting rights, protecting communities' voting rights. How can we allow the Postal Service to continue to take mail processing out of these plants? That affects, you know, the mailing of ballots across the country. Some states are having 2021 elections, but a big one is going to be 2022. So we can't be letting them take these machines out. And then the third issue is, well, I said the third issue was closing post offices themselves. So we've got to protect every one of them, because we're trying to expand, whether it be with postal banking, broadband, bringing services to rural communities so that they have the benefit of being able to communicate and be involved in what's going on across the country. I wanted to give just like some examples of things of how we've won. We had an arbitrator, very first time in history, our arbitrator Goldberg, that actually on the mail processing plant consolidations, he gave a moratorium to the union when we were in negotiations and we had to go to arbitration. And he put in writing that management would have to do new feasibility studies. And when they do feasibility studies, that's including public meetings in every community where a mail processing plant is being affected. So those things should be happening, but DeJoy has no plans on doing that. Even when he was talking about the 10-year plan, what did he come up with? He said, people asked questions about, did you do any surveys? Did you do any public meetings to find out what the communities want, what the people of America want? And they did not. They did not do any official kind of surveys or whatever. They say they have their own survey there that within their organization, but we haven't seen anything like that. So anyway, that's another thing that's so important, to try to be able to look at stopping these movements. The arbitrators award, like I said, we have that as well. We also have a grievance in about the last consolidations and about them utilizing old data. So that's another big argument to make, is that they do not have any new data. Plus last year was a COVID year. We had over 123,000 postal workers that were either out from testing positive or quarantined. There was effects to our whole communities around the country. People were doing packages because they were trying to get survival items. They weren't doing as much of the cards and sending that out, but still in all, you cannot shut that down, the right and the ability for people to be able to send letters back and forth. It's very lonesome out there. A lot of people shut down, shut in. You're gonna cut off their mail service, their first class mail service, and degrade it even worse. That's like ridiculous. So those are some good arguments to make. Last time, there was a big fight over the consolidations back in 2014 and 2015. Some of the locals that were involved that did some really great jobs, I would say Ohio was one of them. They had an organizer that was fantastic. She put together, along with other people on her team, mymailOhio.com. It was a place where the communities could go to get information about the consolidations, about making talking points and arguments about why they shouldn't have their consolidations happen within their cities. And actually they all did, they did get through the worst part, because there was only 12 sites in 2015 that ended up losing all of their mail processing. We still had 64 sites that were pretty much saved, other than the fact that their mail was still being canceled somewhere else, but they still got to do their mail processing work when it came back. The other issue, some of the other locals distributed flyers. Some of them requested moratoriums. They had their representatives putting in letters and resolutions. And then there were petitions. A couple of places had quite a lot of petitions. There were teleconferences this was in California, City of Industry. They did teleconferences every Wednesday to keep together all of California, because there were 6 sites, I think, in California that were being affected. So they were communicating with each other from one site to the other about their activities, so that they could all share in what they were doing. There were a lot of flyers and leaflets handed out at places like farmers markets, Civil War days, home garden show, in front of stores, and in front of the post offices. So those were some of the ideas. We have a national committee that has come together to also come up with a lot of things that could happen. We would really like locals to get involved in the PPC, which is the mailers council meetings that they have, because you need to get in touch with the mailers, everybody in the community, the city council, the mayors, get them all on board. And we really need to do a big push. And of course, media makes a big difference, as we saw last year. Mark was on MSNBC quite often, and I think it made a big difference. It got people to understand that, yeah, hey, there really is some issues here that's affecting us, our communities, not just postal workers, it's affecting everybody. So those things are really important. We're going to be putting out a lot more information later, but again, we do have those places to start sending your public comment to the PRC as well as to the Federal Register. Town hall meetings, those are another thing that are really great. Township meetings. But you definitely got to be connected to your legislative reps, your House reps and your senators. Senators can also ask for an inquiry, a congressional inquiry on what the background is, on why they think they need to go through a mail processing consolidation. And like I said, they have not done any updated studies. And with the COVID last year, again, that would not be a good year to count as part of a study because it's not a normal year. So those are things that are important. Lastly, HR 119, that is a House resolution that's so important. It's about changing the service standards back to the way we all want it, to have overnight delivery in our SCF areas, and to be able to get those machines back that were taken out in some of those facilities so that we can actually have a good, prompt mail service. And we're also going to try to get the NALC, the mail handlers, and the rural letter carriers to be working with us in the projects. They did last time. We had a webinar that we shared all together, that we put together as a group, the Postal Alliance. And so we'll be trying to do that again. And with that, I think I'll turn it over. I'm not sure how much time I just used, so I want to make sure everybody's got time. So I'll go ahead and pass it on to Jonathan.
Thank you, Sister Debbie. Yeah, it's very important that we contact the Federal Register to let them know that we do not want a deteriorated postal service. We want to maintain our standards. The one interesting fact that you did bring up was the fact that the one of the ideas that the new plan has is to close post offices and reduce hours. Well, also in the 10-year plan, it's hypocrisy because they talk about expanded services in a very vague way. So while they're saying that they want to expand services, they're also saying that they want to close post offices. So you can't do both. You're not going to be able to expand services and get the desired effect if you're closing post offices and reducing the hours. So thank you for your time, Ms. Reddy. If everyone can take a look into the chat, there are several links in the chat that offer very good information. The Rural Organizing Project, resources organizing to save rural post offices, apwu.org, fighting consolidations, apwu.org, post office closures, and apwu.org, labor and community coalition building. Very critical items in defending the public postal service and understanding our issues. Moving on to our second panelist, Brother Jonathan Smith is the dynamic president of New York Metro, the largest postal union in the APWU. Brother Jonathan, can you tell us about some of the good and bad experiences you've had in the past in fighting to defend the public postal service? And as a union president, how this is more than about your members and postal workers, this is about communities, and talk about the struggles of the postal service as well.
Thank you, Brother Brown. First of all, I'd like to say how I'm honored to be on this distinguished panel with Sisters Reddy and Sister Campbell. I couldn't think of two better people to be on this panel with. I think it's an important point too, as far as the PRC is concerned. You only have to June 22nd to put in that comment. So, let's not let our enemy be procrastination, because sometimes our enemy is procrastination, thinking that we have all the time in the world when tomorrow might be too late. So we have to understand that. I will talk a little bit. I don't know what just happened, but I will talk a little bit about what happened in New York Metro. And the first thing I have to say is New York Metro's position is, and I'm stating that for New York Metro, our position is that if we're going to clean up a lot of the problems in the Postal Service, and I'm not talking about the PAEA, but as far as the delivery standards is concerned, as far as the closing and the consolidations is concerned, the same problem has been the problem since June 15th, and that's William DeJoy. And we are on record as saying that William DeJoy needs to go because we need a Postmaster General whose interest is the Postal Service and the American people, and to provide them the best service possible. The only thing that William DeJoy has qualified him to be Postmaster General is that he was a big donor for the Republican Party and Donald Trump specifically. That is his only qualification. Let's just keep it real. And he came in, and Maya Angelou had a saying, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I believe you, DeJoy. I believe exactly who you are when you came out, because it's insulting to say that he has a 10-year plan, because a plan would mean that you would involve the citizens, that you would involve, he even admitted in Congress that he didn't involve the Postal Board of Governors when he originally came in there, when he would involve the workers, he would involve the community, he would involve other people, he would have studies like Debbie was talking about. None of that was provided. So to call it a plan is an absolutely joke. Let's call it like we should call it, Williams DeJoy's suggestion for the future of the Postal Service, because there is no plan about it, because a plan would mean you need cooperation from other parties that don't necessarily agree with you, but we can find some middle ground to work this together. Now, to get into what's important, this has never been about saving postal jobs. What this has been about is saving communities. The Postal Service is a treasure in these communities that has always provided a service. And that's the problem when you have millionaires and billionaires coming into these jobs, because their focus is they want to see the Postal Service as a business. It is not a business. The Postal Service is a service. It was a service that was put into the Constitution to serve the American people. And I have never seen such unequipped leadership at the postal level that are going out their way to take services away from the people that we as postal workers so desperately want to provide. See, when you present your plan, it has to make common sense. Let's not even go. Common sense says that if I take the mail off of planes and I take it across the country on trucks, I'm definitely going to have that mail there even later. Now, one of our strengths as postal workers is we have been going, I think, for 10 years straight, maybe even longer, that we're the most trusted government agency out there. That didn't happen by accident. We aren't there. We take pride in what we do. And now what concerns me, because sometimes we don't want to be honest, let's be honest. A lot of the politicians, and I'm talking about Democratic and Republican, stopped being concerned about the mail as soon as the election in 2020 was over. And we're going around saying the elderly depend on the mail to get their medicine. Did that stop after November? What about our soldiers overseas that need to hear from home, that need some encouragement, that need a letter coming from home? Did that stop after November? What about all this money that they want to put into small business and grow the economy? Well, how can a small business compete without the Postal Service? Did that stop after November? None of this stopped after November. So what we have to do, my grandfather used to say all the time, if you want to hurt somebody's feelings, don't make up nothing, just tell them the truth. And the truth is, we don't have a failure of producing in the Postal Service. We have a failure in leadership of the Postal Service. And if we remove that failure, we can start providing the service. See, what failure is when you want to be like a thief in the night to close the Postal Service, knowing that you have to notify the public about a public hearing, and you put the notice in an obscure area where nobody can see it. A failure of the Postal Service is when you finally do have the public hearing, you have nothing there but 10 chairs, because that tells you you don't expect anybody to show up. See, it is our responsibility to educate not only the new generation of postal worker, but our country is getting younger. We have a lot of people that is growing up that don't understand the importance of the labor movement and how instrumental it is, because the strength of the labor movement is the strength of the middle class. That's what the labor movement has always represented. How strong is the middle class? So we have to understand, you want good jobs? Fight for your Postal Service. You want good wages? Fight for your Postal Service. All these are interlinked. Martin Luther King says, you can't have labor rights without talking about civil rights. See, because the Postal Service is a large hiring of the veterans. The Postal Service hired more minorities than anybody else in this country. This is the Postal Service, so you can't talk about labor rights without talking about civil rights. And what you have to do, you got to get out to the community. You can't get on Zoom and and say, come to this meeting. What you got to do is like that old-fashioned guy that knew he was going to have a hard time selling a vacuum cleaner. What he did was he knocked on your door. And he knocked on your door because he had to bring that vacuum cleaner to you to show you the importance and the effectiveness of this vacuum cleaner. So when we got to get the community out to a community meeting, first is our job, because the Postal Service has made it clear they're not going to educate or inform the community. So we need to get out there. But what we need to do is we need to stop putting up signs on poles, and we need to knock on some doors. If we're the most trusted agency anyway, who could be afraid to see somebody with a postal uniform on knocking on their doors? In fact, in my opinion, they would welcome it. And a lot of times they find out when you knock on their doors, they have no clue what they're trying to do to their postal service. They have not been informed. They have not been educated. But what we also have to do outside of these attacks on closing and consolidation and the change of the delivery standard, we also got to knock on the door in the off season and say, we need you to vote. We need people to get out there to vote. We need these politicians to say that if you don't act towards the community and what the community needs, we can show a body of people that are willing to vote you in, or we're willing to vote you out. That's the message that we have to start sending. And you know how powerful it is? In New York Metro, we went to town hall meetings where the place was packed. The Postal Service was in shock. The community boards didn't even realize what was on the agenda. They thought the Postal Service just wanted to talk. And we had people there, and my speech was simple. You will close this Postal Service over my dead body. And my dead body looks a lot better when I got a group of people behind me saying the same thing. It looks so good when you see the old lady coming out in the rain with her walker, wanting to save her Postal Service, saying how important it is for her to get her medicine. It looks so good when the other community organizations come around and say, you know, you wash my back, I'm going to wash y'all. We're all in this fight together. That's what the Grand Alliance is supposed to be about. That's what the Postal Alliance is supposed to be about. What are these common issues that affect all of us? And these common issues has always been the Postal Service. It's a right to get information across this country at a reasonable price. It's a right to get your mail delivered efficiently and as quickly as possible. It's not an entitlement. And a lot of these politicians want you to think this is an entitlement. No, it's a right. And it's a right that, like all other rights, we have to absolutely fight for. But we have to understand how far we come, because they will take this away. We didn't get these rights easily, and we didn't get these rights freely. It was a struggle. And when our men was all fighting in Vietnam and they had to move the mail in the Postal Service, who went to work? Our women went to work. Our women went to work, and this is how they got into the Postal Service. When they wouldn't hire women, it was unheard of, but they came into the Postal Service because the government then, just like the government now, always understood the bottom line, and that's money. They had to keep moving the mail. So we got to treat this, we got to treat the American people, we got to treat the Postal Service just like our creed. No matter rain, snow, gloom, or night, we need you to come out and fight. We need you to make a call. We need you to call your Congress people. We need you to call your senators people, because there is no way, you know, my grandfather always said that you might outthink me. You might outmaneuver me. You might even outfight me, but you won't outwork me. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Jonathan. Always a pleasure to hear your passionate stance on postal issues. Just want to touch on one of the earlier things you said about DeJoy's appointment to the position of Postmaster General. That in itself was right with corruption. William DeJoy was not on the initial list of candidates to be the Postmaster General. He was snuck in by a Republican donor who was on the Board of Governors, who was closely aligned with Mitch McConnell. He essentially is a plant. He doesn't deserve it. Two of the outgoing Board of Governors last year, Ron Stroman, David Williams, said he was not qualified for that position. And early on in his tenure as Postmaster General, he proved to the country that he was not qualified for that position, as the mail severely deteriorated early on in his tenure as Postmaster General. Our third speaker is the executive director of the very militant organization, Rural Organizing Project, Could you please tell us about the actions your organizations have done to bring light to the issue of the public postal service and defend the public postal service in rural communities where it means so much as a lifeline to the public?
Thank you so much. So much for inviting me. It's really an honor for ROP to be on this webinar alongside y'all doing such powerful work. So just a little bit of background for folks who are not so familiar with Rural Organizing Project is that we are an Oregon network of more than 84 groups that are advancing democracy and organizing their communities for human dignity across the state. And we began really getting involved in the fight for post offices in 2011. Which was also the year of the Occupy movement kicking off. And we had over 46 communities that had Occupy encampments or groups that were actively talking about the 99 versus the 1% and really talking about economic inequity in really new ways. And, you know, while like New York City had a huge Occupy group and an encampment that was constantly under police attack, we had some really interesting dynamics for rural communities were using these encampments where like the police were even just like leaving it alone and people were like taking hours and hours out of their lives to come down to the encampment and chat about economic inequity for the first time in many people's lives. So back in the end of 2011, we ended up getting a phone call from two gentlemen in the small towns of Deadwood and Swiss Home. Don't worry if you've never heard of them. Many rural Oregonians who claim that they know the state real well have never heard of Deadwood or Swiss Home either. They have a combined population about 450 people. And they called us because they had exhausted themselves talking to their senators, talking to all of their, you know, everyone that they could kind of reach, the governor's office. They had called the ACLU. They had called anyone that they could think of because their post office was on a closure list. They only heard about it because the postmaster kind of broke protocol and happened to tell some folks, even though they were told that they were not to, at risk of losing their jobs. And so they were ringing every alarm bell that they could find to try and save their post office. And finally, someone had said, well, maybe you should call the Rural Organizing Project. We don't know what else to tell you. So they called us after they had collected petition signatures from literally every single person in their community. Every single person, they did this a single person in their entire communities, just to really emphasize that that's not an exaggeration. They had diligently knocked on every single door to get every single signature to say, under no circumstances do we want to lose our post office. It is too important to our communities. So once they kind of reached us, we were A, stunned that they had done such powerful work, and then B, you know, their ask of us was, well, we saw on your website you're supporting all these Occupy groups. If we were to occupy our post office, would you work with us? Which, you know, that's like magic. Hell yes, we will work with you. Whatever we can do to support you, we're in. So we began chatting with these folks and discovered that Senator Merkley, Oregon Senator Merkley, had been convening phone calls with folks across this list of, you know, it was about 40 post offices then that were on an immediate close list. And so we ended up getting the list of everybody's phone number, everybody's contact information, and we started calling through. And so these folks in Deadwood and Swiss Home said, well, we're going to do a friendly occupation of our post office. We're going to bring our postal workers cookies and cards of appreciation, and we're going to really spend some time working with our neighbors to name all the ways that the post office is about more than mail. The post office is the place where you go when there's a crisis. This is the place you go to get the news. Let's talk about the fact that huge swaths of rural Oregon, which is true of many other rural states, the only way to communicate for rural communities is through mail. There's no internet. The phone lines haven't been maintained since the 50s, so there's no dial-up even. There's no phone calls that you can have, and there's no cell reception. So if you are living in these rural communities that are geographically isolated, mail is a literal lifeline. Are surrounded by landslides on every side, which these communities had just experienced. The post office is where you went to figure out who had extra insulin to share. who had running water and can get fresh water to families who didn't have it. So folks, that's why folks were just like, what do we got to do? What do we got to do to save this? Because this just cannot go down. We cannot, our community cannot take one more hit. And in many of these communities, the post office was literally the last infrastructure that is publicly ran, publicly owned in the community. So they didn't have their schools anymore. They lost any kind of city infrastructure. So literally the only public place in these communities were their post office. It was that lobby. And in many cases, the postmaster in that lobby was their mayor. You know, that was how word was spreading about how to support someone who just had a stroke and needed some help. It was where people coordinated search parties. It's where people when they got bit by rattlesnakes. I mean, we have so many of these stories about how the Postal Service is life-saving in these communities. So Deadwood and Swiss Home said, let's do these friendly Occupy actions. And so we hit the phones and we started talking to everyone we could find in these 42 communities at first who had post offices listed for closure. And 38 of them said, hell yeah, let's do. We're going to occupy our post office on the Monday before Christmas, which was the most longest lines of the year are on that Monday before Christmas. And so folks did everything from bacon cookies, which we actually had a number of postmasters call us personally, kind of kidding that they were mad at us that we ruined their diet, because they got 40 pounds of cookies and they were they were inundated with cookies. Some communities made these giant 4-foot tall cards, greeting cards that were thank you cards to the postal workers. Other communities were chatting with everyone in line and collecting petition signatures. And we ended up collecting on that one day in rural post offices of communities that have 400 people. We collected over 3,600 signatures on that day alone. Which, you know, for those of you who might be in the cities, that might not seem like such a big number, but when it's like 100% of these communities got their petition signatures, it's pretty amazing. We actually saw too in some communities like Deadwood, there's a pretty big difference between kind of the retirees who are more hippie and then the folks who are more blue collar and are logging industry workers. And that divide had never been crossed until it was for their Occupy action. And all of a sudden, people who had lived in Deadwood, population 284 people, had spent 40 years of their lives in this community and had not met each other until they were in the parking lot of that post office. And so folks did everything from, you know, strategizing about what comes next, which included, like in Deadwood, for example, talking about how they were not going to let the doors close on their post office. And so it was loggers and hippies for the first time talking about how they were going to physically keep those doors from closing, including loggers maybe wedging some logging equipment in the doors if need be. So that actually led to, on that action, they had a bucket, like a backhoe with an occupied sign in it. That was like their way of being like, we're ready to escalate if you are, like, you're not taking our post office. So out of that, we ended up having huge, as I mentioned, a huge number of petition signatures, and we had delegations of postal workers, community members, mayors, county commissioners deliver all of those signatures to our Congress people. And we actually saw, which was really powerful, a huge number of those stories were actually highlighted by Senator Merkley on the Senate floor, including of Tiller, Oregon, and Douglas County, where the postmaster told her story about the day that she saw the mail piling up and she knew something had happened to someone. She went and checked on him and he was on the floor and he had suffered a stroke, and she was literally the only person who would have found him because his mail was piling up. You know, we had testimony from the postmaster of Oxbow who talked about how it was also his ad hoc job to coordinate the life flight helicopter when there were people who were bitten by rattlesnakes, and how many lives he saved as a result of doing what he did. we ended up hearing also through the grapevine that there was this community called Summer Lake, and we had heard stories about their process. So now this is getting into 2012. We're at the end of the 2011, we start hearing about the post plan. And that's where all of a sudden those 40 post offices that were no longer on the chopping block are fine. They were told that they're fine, they're saved, don't worry about it, everything will be okay, quiet down, y'all. And then we heard about the post plan. And so all 40 of those post offices, plus another 100, plus the mail processing facilities in the state were on this list for hours cuts or privatization or both. And that's where we started hearing about Summer Lake. So as was mentioned in kind of our prep conversation, there's procedures that the Postal Service has to follow in theory in order to close a post office. And that includes that they need to notify the community, they need to hold a town meeting, they need to mail people, there's often a survey. And so what we discovered is that the Postal Service was not actually following these rules, and that only 5 out of 500 people were getting a survey in their PO box, and only certain people were hearing about the town hall meeting. And then the town hall meeting, they didn't actually want to listen to what the community wanted. They just wanted to do their little dog and pony show and then check the check mark off and then go away and say they did their job and the community says it's fine. So in Summer Lake, we heard about their organizing that not only saved their post office, it got an increase in hours. And what they did is the Postal Service had scheduled a tiny little room, and Jonathan had mentioned that before too, of like, you know, they'll maybe set it up for like 5 or 10 people. And so the community said, oh, hell no, everyone in this town wants to have a piece of the Postal Service here. We are gonna get a bigger room that will actually fit everybody. And then they began raffling off a gas card that was $50, which it would cost to go to the nearest post office and back round trip. And so they were raffling it off as come and you might win this gas card. And then not only did they prepare a whole lot of testimony for the Postal Service, they actually got a retired sheriff to MC the event. So the Postal Service rep was taken aback because all of a sudden there's an MC and they don't get to run the show. And the Postal Service rep actually tried leaving the room, and instead of letting the rep leave the room, they shut the doors and they told her to sit down and that it was time for her to listen. And what they did is they presented all of the different ways that their community was going to be negatively impacted if they lost their post office. And it went from everything to it's unsafe because the weather conditions are so horrible, to people rely on it for their medication who can't drive, to how important it is to have a postmaster making a living wage. That is a union job that actually has health care, and it's the only one in their community and they're about to lose it. Like, that one is worth fighting for. And so folks went through this entire process of outlining all of this that they had diligently researched, and finally let the Postal Service rep go. They unlocked the doors and let her go. And they actually learned that they had their post office wasn't on the chopping block anymore, and expanded their hours. So that is how we knew we had a model on our hands. And so we put together a toolkit. There's a link there in the chat of really like showing the Summer Lake model of what does it mean to not let the Postal Service do a sloppy job of letting people know about this meeting, making sure everyone knows what the steps are so they can kind of nail the Postal Service when something happened that didn't follow the plan, when they didn't get adequate notice. So they could actually reinforce that this was not the right way to go about this, and buy some more time for the community to really organize and show up to support. And not only did we have a huge number of groups within Oregon decide that they were going to take this toolkit on, like to the point where like the Postal Service put out an announcement, we heard it was national, saying that if they were found, any postmasters or postal employees were found working with the Rural Organizing Project, they would be disciplined. And that they were telling us that you know, telling workers that they had to call the police on us if they see us on property and stuff, and that we have to stay on the sidewalks, which is just kind of hilarious because most of the rural communities that were on the chopping block don't have sidewalks. And so the postal workers were just, and you know, anyway, rural Oregonians are not a bunch that you can intimidate into silence very easily. And then especially the postal workers were like, oh, don't tell me what to do, which was also very fun. So we saw just huge amounts communities taking over their meetings and making sure that there's huge turnout. And so we started seeing slowly different post offices coming off of the post plan, but we still had our processing plants were on the plan, including Springfield. So we, in collaboration with Community and Postal Workers United, the local APWU, NELC, you know, anyone that we could kind of build relationships with, we were kind of saying, well, what can we do about this Springfield plant going down? And so we began working on a plan to have a civil disobedience action. And a number of folks said, we want to lock down on the docks and really bring attention to the fact that we can't actually have a postal service if we're going to lose this critical infrastructure in our region. And so a number of folks, and Jamie probably remembers better than I do how many folks, I think it was 7 or maybe 9 folks locked down, and they refused to be arrested, including a number of folks who were the raging grannies who were dressed up in shawls and bonnets. And I was just sharing earlier, one of my favorite things is that it got a ton of media attention. It made some national media, which was exciting and wonderful. But the media coverage included the postal inspector who's arresting these folks, pulling, you know, he was actually in reality very gently guiding one of these older women in a bonnet and a shawl aside, and she's singing and she's gesturing wildly as she's doing it, and it looks like he is really manhandling her in an uncomfortable way, which really blew up in his face. But it also brought a lot of attention to, like, you don't do that to Peg Morton, you don't do that to nice old ladies who just want to save the post office. What are you doing arresting people who want to save the postal service of all things? And it really did escalate to the point where we were very fortunate that Springfield and Bend were 2 of the plants that were taken off of the post plan, but we now know that Bend is back on the chopping block, and we're talking with folks out there about what does it mean and what are we going to do here in order to save the postal service in Oregon, knowing that it's about so much more than mail. I would just like to conclude, you know, we have a number of things that we're really excited about that we're chatting with folks about right now across the network. But as always, we're really excited to be in relationship with y'all and anyone really important organizing right now, and would love to connect if there's any way we could support rural organizing out in your neck of the woods, and would love to just stay in relationship and connection in this moment because it's so critical for all the ways that Debbie and Jonathan have just outlined that we really rally right now. It's a critical moment. Thank you so much, y'all.
Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you for the work the Rural Organizing Project is doing to defend the public postal service and all public entities in your area. It just goes to show you the strength of the people, you know, the power of the people, the power of workers, the power of organized communities. Those people in those communities found out their post office was about to close. They banded together and they, you know, went all out to defend what is rightfully theirs against a postal organization who doesn't look at community post offices as true places of the community, just small businesses that deliver mail, and not a gathering point, not a point of resources, not a point of information, just where we get the mail. And that's not the vision people in rural communities or urban communities have. No one has that vision for the post office, the postal service, aside from the top leadership who just want to use the ruling class economic ideology to cut as much as they can, as opposed to expanding services to those communities. Like you said, the communities where you're at haven't had the telephones upgraded in years. The Postal Service can provide broadband, you know, infrastructure can help those communities. Does postal leadership have those ideas? No, they just see it as this is how much it costs, this is how much we can save, supposedly, let's get rid of it. In the past, as they've done that, the savings they thought they were going to get were never ever panned out to what they initially planned. So you have an effect that didn't get the desired change. in a deteriorating circumstance for the community. So yeah, definitely great work you guys did. And to tie in something you said earlier with something Jonathan said that, we can't depend on Democrats and Republicans. And you also said that, you contacted, Congress people and they were not doing as much as they could. So like I said earlier, it falls back to the people. People organized have tremendous power to impact change in their communities and across the world. Thank you to the panelists, all of you, Vice President Zaretti, President Smith, Director Campbell. I hope our audience, were able to gain a lot of knowledge and passion for this cause. Anyone has any questions, please input them in the chat. We'll get to you. Until then, if any of our panelists like to add a few notes, a few things they have that they didn't get to while they were doing their presentation, the floor is yours until we get some questions in.
Let me say this, Aaron. What made me so proud of New York Metro? It was a total team effort because we have probably the largest retiree chapter in APWU, and those retirees were instrumental in getting out there because legislation affects them too. A postal service being degraded has a great effect on them too. And they went out amongst the communities, and we went to these different communities, these elected officials, and we talked to them. We had a conversation with them. We went to the borough president and said, "What's up?" A lot of times the borough president, and one thing, let me advise you, check out the notice that the Postal Service gave you because the Postal Service has changed their strategy. One of their strategies that I noticed in New York Metro, and you have to check out the Postal Service story because that's just when it becomes a story. They were claiming that they had to close down some of these facilities because they would not renew their lease. But when we went and talked to the landlord would say, they said they need half the space. So what is he going to do with a big building and giving the Postal Service half the space? But with the current space they currently had, the employees were falling over the mail. So we know that's not true. So what the Postal Service is doing, they create a condition to try to convince the community and the unions themselves that they need less space when they need more space. And this is how they're trying to not re-up a lot of the leases for the places that they don't own. So this is one of the tricks that we need to be aware of. If you go to the post office and you see notification, whether you be a citizen or work in the Postal Service, and you see a public hearing notice, bring it to our attention because a lot of times we don't know about it. The Postal Service, like Debbie said earlier, they don't get notification. So we don't have any notification. And a lot of times we have not much time to organize to get the community involved to get them to these hearings because they have already set the deal up with the different community boards. And they go to the community boards because they know that they're required by law to have these meetings. And they try to have these meetings in the dark of night with no intention of anybody getting there. We have to bring attention to, we were successful in a couple of times where they had to reschedule the meeting because we let them know that the public, you can't have a public meeting without the public. You have to notify the public if it's a public meeting. So it's important that we stay vigilant, but a lot of times you're going to have to act with very short notice. And we did that, and you have to be prepared to act no matter what the weather is, because the Postal Service, we've had some public hearings that were on some bad weather days. And the Postal Service was very happy about that. So let me tell you, when they schedule a public hearing, the Postal Service don't care if it's 10 feet of snow. They are not going to reschedule that meeting because they're not having that meeting to hear your concerns. They're having that meeting to say that they had the meeting so they can move forward with their plans. But last but not least, it's important when you have that comment period to actually comment. They have a comment, they have an open comment like the PRC right now. It's up on June 22nd. You have to the June 22nd to comment. When you have that open comment period, it's important that you send those comments in because the Postal Service will tell you, well, we haven't heard from anybody. They're all right with our plan. We've literally ran the Postal Service representative out of those meetings that the community cussed them out so bad that they couldn't stay. So these are some of the things that you would be facing. And I'm pretty sure as we go forward, they got more tricks up their sleeve. But this is what happened in New York Metro. And Louis DeJoy, He knows all the tricks of the trade, and he's coming right back after these things. And he has made it clear, because one of the things that stood out to me when he was doing his hearing, he said, "Get used to seeing me." Like a thumbs up. He told Congress, "Get used to seeing me." Like, I'm not going nowhere. So I think with enough pressure from the people, and it's a whole different speech about how I feel about the chairperson, Ron Bloom, the chairperson of the Board of Governors. I think he needs to go too, because he does not, with him signing on to this 10-year plan, he's just as culpable as Louis DeJoy with what he's offering the American people as what they call a service, when I call it a disservice, is what they're offering in that 10-year plan.
Thank you, Brother Jonathan. Thank you for reiterating that fact that the Postal Service, postal management, postal leadership does not let the public know about these meetings, and it's purposefully done so they can do what they want to do and take the postal services down. Thank you for bringing up Chairman Bloom again, who I like to add is in a holdover year as a Board of Governor. The Board of Governors usually serve 7-year tenures. Right now, Bloom is in a holdover year, and our main goal for Bloom is to make sure President Biden does not reappoint him to the board. Of course, getting rid of DeJoy is an objective, is a goal. Getting rid of the bad side of the Postal Board of Governors who weren't there prior to the recent selections of Amber McReynolds, Ron Stroman, and possibly Anton Hajar. Those other governors should be gone too. But critically, Ron Bloom cannot be selected for another 7-year tenure as the chairman of the Board of Governors. He's a dino, a Democrat in name only. He reflects the ruling class economic ideology that wants to deteriorate the service, and continuing him in that position only gives room to try to influence Democrats on a certain degree that, hey, DeJoy may not be as bad as some people think he is, when actually he's actually worse. So thank you for bringing it up, Brother Smith. Sister Debbie, you would like to make a couple remarks?
Yeah, well, just going to the issue that Jonathan brought up about fighting the post office closures. Detroit went through the same thing. In one of their small stations, they were going after them, and the Postal Service put up a sign telling people that they could have their meeting on virtual. Well, about 80% of the people in that area didn't have computers. How were they supposed to be getting on virtual, broadband? None of that. So, but luckily, and again, it was the same thing as Jonathan mentioned, the landlord, we got a hold of the landlord and found out he wasn't trying to stop him. He wanted the post office there. It was the post office that didn't want to be there. And this happens over and over again. So, it's a big fight. And when there's issues with the actual space and when they say they're going to have a meeting, there's regulations that tell the Postal Service that they have to reschedule if they don't provide an opportunity for the whole community to be able to attend a meeting. And so again, like we said about with the COVID and all of that, how dare you go after consolidating plants and closing post offices? We're still not out of the harm's way yet, and people have not been, there's still people who are still closed in. How can you think about doing anything with the Postal Service in this venue? You should be waiting at least 2 or 3 years and making sure you follow protocol, follow the handbooks and manuals, the PO 408, and make sure that people are getting their right to speak about their Postal Service and their mail processing facility. First class mail is very important. And for DeJoy to go after first class mail, that's the people's mail. That's where a lot of people utilize that mail. It may be going down in volume, but number one, the Postal Service is a service. And this was a right that, again, we've talked about it, the Constitution. I've gone and talked at 8 states so far since the notification came out of talking to people about getting ready and to do some activities. And I just wanted to do a shout out for Iowa. I think it's a really good example. So Des Moines, Iowa, and the state of Iowa put together an actual rally to stop the service standard changes. And what they did, they went to the AFL-CIO in their state, and they were willing to do a live stream. So it's a little bit different than just a rally. It's the live stream. You were able to show on live stream all the protesters, the picketers, all the workers, the other unions, the community people that were there. You got to see their signs. You also got people to speak as well. And so all of that was on a live stream. And then you can take that live stream and share it all over the country. So it's, again, it's another way of trying to get that you know, the important message that we have to get out, that we don't have time. We have to start getting those public comments in. We have to show that the people are irate and they are going to fight for the Postal Service. So again, I just want to say thanks. I loved all of the stories as well. It just happens so often. And, you know, we've got to just continue to educate the communities and let them know that this is going on. And like I said, too, with the Iowa issue, the state president was able to get on to Rachel Maddow on Friday. They showed the picket, they showed the live stream, parts of it, and then they also had the state president speak a little bit on this. So it was really important, and that just goes to show you what you can do to spread the word out across the country as well.
Thank you, Sister Debbie. Yeah, again, please contact those two websites she spoke of earlier, the PRC website and the Federal Register. That's the best way to let those bodies know that we do not want deteriorated public postal service functions. Brother Dennis O'Neill of the New York Metro Retirees, APWU, would you like to say a few words? I think your mic is open.
Hi, folks. I just want to step in behind particularly Jonathan, but all the panelists, and make a couple of very quick points. Point one, it is not just rural post offices that are threatened to be closed down. In the Bronx, we had, well, it was more than a post office, an actual sorting facility, part of New York Metro, the Bronx General Postal Service was, you know, they did a shrinky-dink thing with it. It was a whole beautiful building with murals and all this stuff. And they took all the sorting capacity out of it, moved it around the corner to a little thing that nobody could see. You know, and we know this because we were out there picketing and demonstrating. I'm just thinking there are probably more that Jonathan may remember, but just in the last few years, we fought off an attempt to close College Park Station and successfully beat God, what the hell is the name of that one on downtown, the old one. We beat several of these, but the point is they use the same rationale that they use. Oh, you don't need it. Oh, there's another one 10 blocks away. Oh, it doesn't get the same amount of business that it used to. Oh, this, oh, that. They had no mind to the actual people who live. The one that we dealt with, that was the Port Authority station down on the west side, right? They moved that into another zip code, you know. So we have to fight, and they wouldn't have moved it at all. They would have just let it shut down and say, oh, we'll find something. They do this in the suburbs too, because they say, oh, y'all got cars, so it doesn't matter if there are, you know, if we close down a post office, because it's just a 10-minute drive to another post office. So we're seeing this in all those areas. That's the first thing. The second thing is, as you know, Jonathan pointed out, as I'm pointing out, you can beat it. But if we have to fight it one by one, we are not going to beat all of them. We may not even beat most of them, which gets around to sort of the point I think Debbie was driving at, and that we all have to take very seriously. People have to know that these attacks are underway. The broad public has to know it, and that it's part of an overall downsizing, privatizing, you know, delivery sabotaging push, because then we've got more background to go to people, because every state doesn't have, you know, a rural Oregonians for not messing with rural Oregon organization that we can go to. So folks like us, we gotta go big, that's all.
Thank you, brother Dennis. Sister Debbie, would like to make another remark?
Just something really quick. When I was in Iowa, I stopped to get a magazine at the airport, and it's that Time magazine, right? So it was about the 100 most influential companies. When I opened it up onto the second page, there was an advertisement from the post office, and get what he says. New routes to anywhere in America. Discover reliable shipping to every address in the country. Business is changing, and the United States Postal Service is changing with it. So you can reach your customers at the speed of now. Find out more at USPS.com, new routes. I mean, what kind of bullshit? I mean, really. And this stuff is probably, I mean, I've never seen the post office, do a lot of magazine advertisements. And here it was this week. So, yeah.
And that seriously looks like a PR campaign because they don't have any confidence in their program. Speaking of what you said earlier about making service changes and decisions during the pandemic, part of the 10-year plan is based on the fact that, the mail that we put on planes was not flying last year at a good rate. Well, the airlines collapsed last year. You can't make decisions about how you're going to move the mail through the air when the airlines themselves aren't even functioning and the country itself isn't even functioning well. One of the things that happened with the last plant closures in 2012 is that that's when these service standards started to deteriorate. But if you really look at the numbers over time, the Postal Service increased their expectations from like a 94 to a 96% of delivery rate. Well, up until last year, we were reaching 90, 91, 92%, short of the 96 goal, but certainly not something where you make a dramatic change where you say, we're going to do away with our existing infrastructure and delay service for another day or two, which is just hypothetical now, because right now they're telling us, we're going to put this mail on the truck and it's going to travel X amount of hours and it's only going to be a day, 2 days, 3 days. That's not proven. That's not proven. That's just their idea on how it's going to move. It could still be 5, 6, or 7 days because they're still going to be waiting to move the trucks until they have a certain capacity. And unless they reach that capacity, what their objective is, the mail's not going to move when they say it is. So their entire plan is based on an idea that's not proven, and is based on changing something that they could have improved to begin with, but instead of improving it, they just threw the baby out with the bathwater and said, let's start from scratch. Are there any other, Tim Hall, would you like to say a few words?
Brown.
Go ahead, Brother Jonathan.
Let me piggyback on what you said just a little bit. You have to take a good look at Louis DeJoy and what his alleged expertise is. He's an expert in logistics, okay? So logistics, he wants to put everything on trucks because a company that he supposedly divested from, and there's some questions in that XPO, since he's been in the Postal Service, has been making millions of dollars. And no one wants to look into this, and if he's not making it, his friends is making it, he's getting a part of that. So let's look at the truth of the matter. You can't go from New York to California by truck and get it there faster by plane. It doesn't even make common sense. It doesn't pass the common sense. But because he's logistic, and you got to look at the underlying problem that a lot of the American people don't know about the Postal Service, is how they're looking to contract out a lot of the work, not using USPS drivers and stuff like that. So it benefits who he's really working for, these contract drivers, in the effort to piecemeal, piece by piece, privatize the Postal Service without saying that he's privatizing the Postal Service.
You're right, brother. I mean, when he first got into the Postal Service, they admitted he had not divested from the institutions, but their excuse was that, well, as the role of the PMG, he's not going to make decisions about this trucking and the organizations that's linked to it. He's the head of the Postal Service. People beneath him are going to make those decisions because when they don't, they're going to fear for their careers. So it's that kind of impact that they should have looked at. Over time, they say he divested, but possibly he divested to his children. So that's still within the family. And even if he is fully divested, not with him, not with his children, his links to that corporation is a conflict of interest. So all of that needs to be looked into, the decisions the organization is making and why Is it going to be effective for the public, or is it going to be a cash maker for Louis DeJoy and his associates? Brother Tim Hall, Detroit, I think you're on the mic. Would you like to say a few words?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I'm calling from the west side of Detroit, and I just want to relate what the situation is in my community. 48228, which is Joyfield Station, very west edge of Detroit, largely Black, a working class community. I've been living here since 1988 and used this post office many times. Right now, we get our mail about 3 times a week. Our post office is only open in the morning, at least as far as I know. 4 out of the last 5 times I've gone there, nobody has been there. There's one clerk. He's there in the morning, but he wasn't there the morning he told me to come. I'm not blaming him. In fact, he's our former union president. But so we have a lot of unrest about this. And if you want to measure this in your own community, go to something called Nextdoor. We have one, and the area is called Franklin Park. And there's a lot of discussion on there about, and a lot of anger about the Postal Service. And I've been on there a number of discussions, and I've been able to get the support of a few people who have continuously gone on there explaining what's going on to the residents. But this has caused a lot of tension. One carrier who was on loan to our station from somewhere else told me, as a woman carrier, that she was nervous about her physical danger in the area, that people were so mad. There was even one occasion, I didn't know about it ahead of time, when people came down to the station and quite angry, and they vandalized the trucks and threatened some postal workers. So it's pretty volatile situation. Now people are arranging to pick up their mail, and there's a line out the door at the station. I've heard, I haven't seen this, but on Saturdays, be a line outside the door waiting to go in and pick up, I mean, that long of a line to go in and pick up their mail. And we have 14 carriers for 40 routes. So that means you get your mail every maybe 3rd day at best. It's a very, very difficult situation. And this is not the most busy station in the city, but you go over there and you stop there to see if it's open. And before you do anything, 4 or 5 cars arrive. There's a lot of people coming there. So anyway, I'm saying all this because to me, it shows the depth of the crisis. And in my personal opinion, it will not change without getting rid of DeJoy. But how do we get rid of DeJoy? Now you have Rolando, the NELC, saying he has no problem with DeJoy. And Mark Dimenstein, who used to say dump DeJoy, said nothing about that at the Post, the hearing on delivery standards. So without the 2 big unions demanding that Biden remove the entire board, how is it going to happen? We still have to press for it. And maybe if we have mass demonstrations in different places, that will bring a different kind of pressure, and pressure from the community. But anyway, it's bad. It's a bad situation.
Thank you, Brother Tim. Sorry to hear about that situation in Detroit, but based on what you said, they're closing the post office down. It obviously sounds like the community still wants the post office open, and it's going against what management is saying, that they have to cut hours because these post offices in certain communities aren't as important as they were. All of the people that need that post office in that community want to keep that post office open, and by their reaction of what you're telling me, they're willing to fight to keep it open if have to. As far as Dump DeJoy, yeah, that is going to be something where we're going to need a groundswell of popular support across the country. There was an opportunity last year, and I don't think enough people, took action on it. There was a concentration on dumping Trump and getting through the election, as President Brother Jonathan said earlier, and there was not enough, dump DeJoy. He's too aligned with Trump and things of that nature, and the nature of how he was appointed as the Postmaster General. So yeah, if we're going to get rid of him or the Board of Governors, there's going to have to be a massive groundswell of public support to get rid of him. And through his actions, that is something we should be able to build, because everyone loves the Postal Service. It's the most popular government agency. I don't think nobody is impressed or happy about how the organization has been run for the last year. I mean, they blame it on the pandemic to some degree. It was the pandemic. I mean, you have to look at the fact that the pandemic began in March. You know, some of the most strenuous lockdowns were March, April, and May. We were able to get the mail out. We were able to deliver at a decent rate. DeJoy comes in June. Within weeks of him announcing his changes, you know, delivery service just drops. So that wasn't the pandemic. That was specifically related to decisions that DeJoy made, possibly to undermine the election. He never came out and said it, but there was enough background around that particular topic to be concerned about that. But, you know, we did stop him on that. We did get some committees at different postal plants across the country, specifically going across the plants, finding mail-in ballots, making sure they got out and got delivered to deliver an election. Anyone else have any questions, or any of our other attendees would like to speak, say a few words on the situation in their area, or how they would like to you know, initiate some activities and fighting to defend the public postal service? Go ahead, Brother Jonathan.
I would like to say something before we close that I think would be remiss. I want the American people to understand that a lot of postal workers, and I think it would be appropriate for a minute of silence, paid the ultimate price to deliver this service, to be insulted right now with these closures and consolidations, stop the delivery standards. I know in the Northeast region, we had at least 40 postal employees die during this virus. I think nationwide, Debbie would probably know a number better than me, more than 100 easy. Postal workers that have died, making the ultimate sacrifice to keep this nation bind together as it was understood in the Constitution. I think that we should take a moment of silence for those that we lost in this great mission to deliver this service to the American people.
Over 150.
Over 150 postal workers have died. And that cannot get lost in this debate. The sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice. When everybody was home, sheltered in place, postal service, the postal workers were considered essential employees. And the politicians were talking about hazard pay. I haven't heard nothing else about hazard pay in any of this legislation. Like all of a sudden the election is over and we have been forgotten about. But I have not forgotten about the sacrifice. I have not forgotten what people did to keep this country binded together. I have not forgotten when people needed respirators that the Postal Service was delivering. When they needed gloves, the Postal Service was delivering. When they needed sanitizer, the Postal Service was delivering. Nothing stopped us. So I'll just respectfully ask that we take a minute before this program is over. We can wait to the end to pay homage to those that made the ultimate sacrifice in this struggle, which obviously Louis DeJoy and Ron Bloom cared nothing about, or maybe even know nothing about.
I concur, Brother Smith. Let's all do a moment of silence for the postal brothers and sisters that we have lost to the pandemic, and for all essential workers we've lost to the pandemic who've been on the front lines risking it all. Amen. I think Ruby Garrett has posted a question to the chat. How can general members of the public best support our postal service? Sister Debbie, you want to take that based on some of the things you mentioned earlier about who we can contact and reach?
Sure. First off, there were two, an email site and a place to be able to go with the PRC so that you can leave a comment in there about how you feel about the service standards being degraded even more. So you want to make sure that you Go to that. We posted it earlier, Jamie, right there. So the PC Federal Register at USPS.gov. You also would be able to make a comment and explain why you do not feel that it's right for the Postal Service to change and degrade the service standards again. This is the second time they did it. The first time was in 2015, and now they're going even further. And we want to stop it, and we want to have them to go back and enhance the service standards back to 2012. And also you can contact your representatives in the House to go on to H resolution 119 to show their support of wanting to go back to the service standards that we had before we had all these big problems with the Postal Service in dealing with being able to deliver the mail, the overtime, the high transportation costs, all these other things all took place once they started consolidating plants. And it got worse and worse as it went through to 2015, and we've been suffering. So we really need to make sure that you do those three things. Contact the PRC, contact the other one, which was the Postal Regulatory Commission. They have a place for you to put comments. You want to make those comments. And again, get your House and your senators as well. They also have the ability to do something about trying to stop consolidations in your, if you have a facility within your state. And also, if you just want to say, hey, you need to stop consolidations nationwide, doesn't matter that it's in our state or not. It's affecting our mail service locally and within our community.
Thank you, Sister Debbie. And I'd like to reiterate, even if it's not affecting your particular post office or your plant now, that does not mean it won't affect it down the road. This is a long-term project by the, ruling class economic ideology, Board of Governors and PMG, where they're just going to erode service. And essentially, my opinion is they really want to move the Postal Service to a package business, away from mail, away from what the public really needs it to be, and compete with FedEx and UPS. So we are the public postal service. We are for the people. We aren't just a business to move packages. So it's important that we let the communities and these PRC and the Federal Register know. I also see that Brother Dennis O'Neill put the Facebook group Save Our Postal Service into the chat. If you have Facebook, please join that group. There's a lot of good information on a daily basis, several times a day, on actions that people take across the country, news on defending the postal public service, and things that management are trying to do that we need to know about. Go ahead, Sister Debbie.
Yeah, the other thing too is that we're still waiting for Anton Hajar to be placed in front of the Senate to be confirmed to be part of the Board of Governors. They have a holdup. You can contact your senators and let them know. We want you to make sure that this happens ASAP, because this is an emergency need to be able to get us to take care of all this mess that has occurred from the 10-year plan. We really need to think about getting a full postal Board of Governors. And I wanted to say one more last thing, only that I just wanted to make sure, I'm not sure who it was, that was one of our speakers that had mentioned about Biden being able to fire DeJoy. He cannot fire DeJoy. It's not his position to do that, but it is the Board of Governors position. And that's why the Board of Governors is so important, to get the right people on board so that we can take care of those situations.
Yeah, definitely. The interesting thing about Anton Hajar is that he was one of 3 Board of Governors nominees that was confirmed by the committee that oversees the Postal Service about a month ago. Last week, 2 of those 3 were confirmed. The third one, Anton Hajar, for some reason, he was not put through. We don't know if there's concerns about his links to, the unions, his links to the labor movement, but it is very, odd and suspicious that although there were 3 confirmed to go to the Senate to be voted on at the same time, only 2 of the 3 were voted on, and we're still waiting on an official vote on Anton Hajar to get onto the Board of Governors and help defend the public postal service. Another tool that our attendees can use to help defend the public postal service is the DSA4USPS movement. Boom, boom. It can be reached at DSA4USPS at dsacommittees.org. And they also do a lot of work to help defend the institution. Do we have any other attendees that have questions or would like to make comments? Okay, we're right at the hour-and-a-half mark. If any of our panelists would like to take a few seconds to say a final few words.
I just want to say thank you, everybody who got on to this webinar. Please share this information to as many people as you can. Please become an activist and please do it now. We're needing this action now. So we really appreciate all you're doing out there and what you've done in the past, but please be with us for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Brother Jonathan, Sister Jess, any closing words?
I think Vice President already basically said it all. We all have to be in this together. And I'm here not as the president of New York Metro. I'm here as a consumer that depends on the Postal Service. And because I depend on the Postal Service, this fight is very personal for me. I understand the ramifications long into the future. I do understand also the struggle that we had in the past to get to where we're at right now. And I will not, and I do realize that I'm standing on the shoulder of giants that came before me. And I would hate to say that the Postal Service was destroyed on my watch. So I urge you to get involved, get in hold of your representatives, your senators, your Congress people, your local leaders. Your local leaders are very important. And if your union leadership has not taken a position and a stand, I would advise you to get on them, because you know it's our responsibility to galvanize our membership, and most of all, to go to the community and say we're fighting for our service, not our jobs, because that's what my fight is, for our service, not our jobs. It is a right, not an entitlement. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Jonathan. Anyone who would like to who would like access to the recording of this event, please send an email to the DSA4USPS email address. That is DSA4USPS at dsacommittees.org, and they will send you access to this recorded event. That being said, I hope we were able to inform and educate our attendees. Thank you, Ruby, who says, we love y'all and we love the U.S. Postal Service. We appreciate the support and we look forward to fighting with you and others in the future to defend the public postal service. That being said, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Let's get this fight together. Let's defend the public postal service and have a good evening. Thank you.